The other guest is Matt Keelen, who is the founder of the Keelen Group, and Matt's joining us from Washington, correct? Matt, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, clearly you are joining us from Washington. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me,
Thanks for being with us. Have you enjoyed watching this news story?
I really have. You know, it's nice to see some good news for once. There's rumor that the Obama administration is going to bring the engineer up to try to rescue their agenda here after the election as well.
Oh, my. It's interesting. We're going to have Laura Ingle with us coming up, and she's actually at the U.S. company today that has helped in engineering the actual rescue, the drill actually that went in and made the hole, and we're going to have her coming up as well. But I suppose we should talk a little bit about politics too. Let me start with you then in D.C. and ask you about this New Mexico race we were talking about and some of these other races. Early voting is something to consider, polling certainly being watched. You think Americans are paying more close attention than they ever have before to a midterm race?
Jamie, I really do, based on the economic situation that the country is in. People are worried. The economy and jobs are going to be the #1 issue on people's minds. President Obama did a wonderful job of creating tremendous expectations for himself and his administration in 2008. And I think quite clearly has not met those expectations. People are disappointed. People are looking for a way forward. They don't feel like the administration is concentrating on jobs. First it was cap and trade, then it was health care, now it's this mysterious foreign money that they can't prove is involved in the electoral process. They still don't want to talk about their agenda. They still don't want to talk about putting Americans back to work.
Rob, they would insist that they are creating jobs, that the stimulus has worked, and that the health care plan, when we eventually pay for it and it starts kicking in the way it will, is a great thing. Success all the way around.
I'm a Democrat. I don't know if I'm going to wholeheartedly defend the Democrats. I'm going to attack both parties. They're polarizing the country right now. Neither party's doing their job. They're not playing politics. This is what I always say in Strategy Room, and I'm really curious to see the outcome of the elections because I'd like to see a Clintonian kind of presidency in place again, and that's going to mean we're going to need some Republicans in the House. And if that happens, Obama's going to have to start making deals and start playing politics. That's what makes this country run effectively, not two parties on the opposite end of the spectrums name-calling each other.
But could that not work, Matt, for the Democrats if some Republicans get in and by the time the 2012 race comes around, if in fact everything the Republicans want to see happen doesn't happen, would the Democrats then not have yet another platform to use against the GOP?
I think Rob brings up a good point, and I think it goes back to what I talked about with the expectations that President Obama set in 2008. He talked about a post-partisan presidency. Well, we've had anything but that in his first 2 years in office. If he can pivot and actually start working with Republicans across the aisle, moderate and talk about things that people care about right now, you know, putting people back to work and working with Republicans, not excluding them from the room, I think that there's a chance for a comeback for him. I don't see that it's in his DNA. I don't think I've seen him do that any time in his political career. But I do hope, for the country's sake, that he can do that and Republicans can work together with him.
One issue that really hits home for people, and I get email from viewers all the time, is the foreclosure mess. And when we learned last week, Rob, about the fact that banks, big banks like Bank of America, would voluntarily suspend some foreclosures because of potentially shoddy paperwork, potentially even fraudulent, and people suffered. Some people lost their homes when maybe they shouldn't. Some people get a momentary reprieve. How big an issue do you think that is across the country?
It's a huge issue, but it hasn't just come about from nowhere. This has been around when they started no-doc mortgages years ago. This is why one of the reasons we're in a terrible financial crisis now. Somebody could literally get a mortgage by just calling in on the phone to a mortgage broker, giving them a Social Security number, and if they had a good credit rating, and I have a 19-year-old son who hasn't really held a real job yet because he's in college. He has a perfect credit rating. So then they say, how much money do you make? Oh, I make $875,000 a year. Did they check it? No. They just gave people
In
mortgages.
some instances,
so
you're right.
we're paying for that across the board now in every way because it was shoddy salesmanship. It was really, it was probably illegal if you look at what was done. So now we're dealing with
though?
Where's it going?
Because the market today is up, at last I checked, 125 points. And it's not just the first day it's up.
115.61. I don't want to be responsible for hurting the stock market.
115
so let me just say this.
Please don't.
I think everything's going to be fine. Wonderful.
Well, let's see.
It's a mess.
It's not reacting, Rob, to the everything will be perfect.
Give it a minute.
Hasn't gone up a point.
My broker, Andy from Wisconsin, is
Matt, what do you think when people fear losing their homes and maybe haven't been able to regain employment and they see the market where it is, they must be thinking, I don't know, I'm asking, somebody's benefiting from this current situation, but it's not me. What do you think they'll do about it?
I think there has been a great disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street over the last several years. I think Rob makes a great point on
he likes
these
you,
mortgages.
Rob.
I like Matt.
And yeah, Rob actually, it could be me talking when I'm listening to him. I think that part of the big problem here has been, personal responsibility and people going in and getting mortgages that they couldn't afford, and banks doing things to capitalize on it.
Was this something
I think
Matt,
both sides have been at fault in this.
should this have been cleaned up by Washington then at the time of the bank bailouts? Should this question, or do we know if it was asked?
I don't think it was addressed. I mean, in the financial reform package that just passed Congress, Fannie and Freddie were never mentioned. If you're in the D.C. area, you hear advertisements on the radio about, easy mortgages to get through Fannie and Freddie. So I don't think we've learned the lesson yet. And I do admire the state attorney generals for bringing this up. And, a lot of these reforms are going to come from the state up. And I think these attorney generals are really touching a nerve.
When you hear that former President Clinton is out campaigning,
yes.
Rob, what kind of impact do you think he'll actually have in driving the Democratic base to the polls?
That's a good question because I was actually at a conference in Las Vegas in May and I saw President Clinton. We were at the blackjack table together counting cards and I saw he spoke and he trashed both.
Joking for those out there who may believe you do count cards.
I would never count cards. I'm not that good at math. President Clinton really, he came down hard on Obama and on Bush, and it was more of a back-patting session for himself. But I also agreed with him taking his personal politics aside. He was saying what I just said. They're polarizing the country. There's a lot of name-calling, and he pointed out he had a balanced budget. He had an effective presidency. We should be having that again. We can't have what's existing now. It's not benefiting the country.
We didn't have the conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq at the time either. How big an impact do you think, at least in terms of financial allocation, do you think that has on the economy?
Then Obama's going to go back and blame that on Bush for going to Iraq, and it's also I blogged about this morning. I just read a great article in Time magazine, am I allowed to mention them on here, about Blockbuster being obliterated by Netflix because Blockbuster Video had an old business model. And our country, and this is both parties, they seem to think that we're the free world colossus that we were in the 1950s and the 1960s. Well, back then, Buffalo, New Haven, and D.C. were big, powerful, wonderful cities, and so was Cleveland, and we're not anymore. And it's a different country, so we need a different model, and neither party is addressing this.
Well, do you think, Matt, that the country has suffered or will ultimately prosper from the changes in the Obama economic team?
I think that they're a long time coming. I agree with Rob in a lot of respects, particularly Bill Clinton's presidency after 1994 got better. It got better because he had to negotiate with a Republican Congress. I do think forcing Obama and his team to the table with Republicans in Congress and the House and the Senate is going to moderate them. I think most American people are coming at this from the middle. They want problems solved. They feel like two parties are just fighting with each other, have been doing it for a long time. And, I like I said before, I want to reach out and give Rob a hug because I think he's dead on. That
We don't know
if
one
the
another
two-
well enough yet.
I'm,
Next week.
I'm thinking you
You look
guys
good,
must
though.
not
You
get
look really
along off camera because it's
We
a
despise
regular
each
love
other.
fest.
If we were in the green room, we'd be punching each other.
Matt, what makes you think that if there is more of a balance in terms of Republicans and Democrats on the Hill, that they will work together? You can't force that. It either will happen or it won't happen.
My
What
pleasure
will
to
it
serve.
take?
Well, at least they'll be in the room having the discussions. And over the last 2 years, the Democrats had such strong numbers in the House and the Senate that they didn't need any Republican votes until Scott Brown got elected. And they neglected to talk to those people. You know, I think just like Republicans have in years past, they overread their mandate and thought that 2008 was all about them when it really was a rejection of the last 2 years, last 4 years of the Bush administration. And now, hopefully, the people at the White House get the message that the public is not happy with the job that they're doing. They want to start actually addressing the issues they care about, and the number one issue that they care about is jobs.
Right.
The public, not me, says that the stimulus plan didn't work. They're not satisfied with it. They didn't think going another $1 trillion in debt was worth creating a bunch of government jobs. And
It's
that's
interesting,
what
the
they're
talk of the second stimulus has sort of died down for the moment. I want to
Among
ask Maria,
Democrats.
is it possible, Maria, to take a break right now and then come back with Steve Brown so that we could talk a little bit about Michelle Obama and her impact? Okay. She's going to let me know. Okay, let's take a quick break because I want to ask folks at home if they want to email us to strategyroom@foxnews.com. We talked about the Bill Clinton factor. What do you think about the Michelle Obama factor? Help or hurt? She's out campaigning today. We'll have an update when we come back.